Well, probably rat boys are squares.
By the ship.
In other news,
You know it's going to crash.
Canceling all ships is extremely dangerous.
We're Bitcoin.
Bitches in the future?
This is Wheel of Fortune, y'all!
Bitcoin is the future.
Cultish fucking psychopaths, fake but they recycle that. Flood us with these lies, we ignore it, then we cycle back. To this anchor, we are called a time chain, our minds break. In this rabbit hole so deep, we wired up our time frame. We just call it time preference, started with divine presence. Immaculate conception, shit posting is profession. Dunking on central bankers, modern day money changes. Throw 'em out the temple, got no use for they paper.
Got no use for they paper.
Paper.
Got no use for they paper. For they paper.
Modern day money changes.
Money changes.
All right, welcome to the Defend the Network podcast. Today we have Morgan Rockwell, aka @NodeFather on Twitter. Very controversial figure in Twitter, right? I've known about your case for a while, but why don't you go ahead and just start off with who you are and what you did, and just tell us your background, man.
I love giving my rap sheet. I started working on Bitcoin a little bit after white paper came out, 2008 and 9. And I started a company in 2010 called Bitcoin Kinetics. And we made the first Bitcoin ATM, first laundry machine that turned on with Bitcoin, some parking meters, made a gas pump. And so I started this company with my elementary school friend. And we basically started making hardware for Bitcoin related software, which was the first company focused on hardware at the time. CoinKite was there making the first versions of hardware wallets and point of sales. And so we went the Internet of Things route, started working on devices that interacted with the Bitcoin protocol. And after that, we kind of evolved, tried to grow the company while BitPay and Coinbase were doing their payment processing and wallet. And Edge, which was originally Airbits, was in San Diego where we started. They were working on a wallet, so we decided to work on hardware devices, not compete with anyone, kind of be a unique Bitcoin company. And we grew into a research lab and started doing software and hardware work on full nodes. We built the first voting protocol called BitCongress to legislate and write law using the Bitcoin blockchain. And that was a precursor for BitNation, which was the first virtual nation. Got a UNESCO award for that, making passports on the blockchain. The first marriage on the blockchain was done using BitNation, marriage certificate. And so we started doing all this experimental shit with Bitcoin and the blockchain. Did a lot of work on Counterparty.
What year was that? Around what year?
Well, when we really got into doing research and development, it was around 2012, 2013. When the price moved, we used that as an advantage to basically not get funded by anyone. And we got funded by my own pocket and by basically the Bitcoin price. And I'm sorry, I'm next to a fire truck right now.
Yeah, I can use that shit.
Hold on.
Shout out to all the listeners, dude. Yeah, we're basically doing this recording because he might not be free tomorrow. So, but we'll get to that.
See.
We'll get
see.
to that. Hopefully you will be. But
I'm actually sitting below Edge headquarters in San Diego. They're gonna have a Bitcoin meetup tonight. So I'm in the coffee shop doing the digital nomad shit. So
where were we?
So in 2013, 2014, the price of Bitcoin moved so significantly compared to its whole life that it basically didn't have to ask a venture capitalist for money for our company, which was doing a lot of research and development, not really profitable in any way. And actually, Bitcoin Kinetics was the first company to do an ICO. We created 10 billion tokens or shares on cryptostocks.com. And I was advised by a lawyer at the time that that was not a good place to be doing securities on Bitcoin. And so we created Counterparty Assets, which is the first original layer 2 of Bitcoin. Before Lightning and before Liquid, there was Counterparty.
So wait, sorry to interrupt, but is this where people fucking be like, oh, wow, he's a shitcoiner? Is this where people fucking get that, you think?
Potentially. I made lots of different research projects on Counterparty, which is Bitcoin's second layer. And so I made a lot of things before the idea of ICO was there. What we did is I actually filed with the SEC and was going to issue stocks to go on the stock market for a Bitcoin company to become public. This was long before Coinbase and BitPay even got close to being considered to do that. And I was way too early to try, but I did, filed all the paperwork with the federal government, tried to issue stock to raise money legitimately. And it had a connection to one of the projects we were working on, which was BitCongress. We were trying to test it out. So we wanted people to vote with their shares, and we wanted people to get rewarded dividends, just like a Bitcoin wallet. So Counterparty allowed you to make a second layer token on top of Bitcoin to do voting and to do dividends and things like that. So we created a token attached to the Bitcoin network that was attached to our actual shares we were trying to get petitioned by the SEC, so that when someone would vote, instead of coming to a real share meeting, like an old school vote with your shares, we were going to allow people to vote with their wallet shares. And that had never been done before. And there's news articles about us doing that at the time, but it was way too early. It was before the idea of initial coin offering or any of that happened. And it was an experiment using Counterparty for something, because at the time, the only thing Counterparty was getting used for was rare Pepes and cards, games. And so we tried to build things that allowed people to use it for voting, for legislation, for science experiments, for identity, all of the things you hear about. That's what Bitcoin Kinetics was one of the companies initially working on, all those ideas. And so we raised money with tokens. We used tokens for software and hardware that we developed. We used our shares to unlock the doors to our headquarters. You know, we did a lot of weird experiments with that stuff. And it basically allowed us to learn a lot of lessons that we shared with a lot of the community. And that became a lot of the pretenses for people to build things on Ethereum. Because at the time, we were actually working on Ethereum before it went public. And, you know, there was some discovery that I had on who was really pushing money into Ethereum. And I found out about Goldman Sachs' involvement, and it enraged me. So I like stopped doing anything and revolved back to Bitcoin fully only. But at the time, you know, there was Mastercoin and there was Litecoin and these copies of Bitcoin. And so it wasn't anywhere that there was something competing with Bitcoin. It was the first time there was experimental projects going on. And the theory of Bitcoin only or Bitcoin maximalism wasn't even a concept yet. There was talk about, you know, Bitcoin should be the only monetary tool, but some of these other experiments may function. But none of them were monetized things yet. So that discussion hadn't reached the population yet. And so I've been working on these weird projects that all spawned from Bitcoin from the beginning. And the whole time, I never asked a VC or an investor for any money. I traded Bitcoin on local Bitcoins and Bitcoinica and Mt. Gox and all the original exchanges. I was really good at currency trading at the time because I was a Forex trader in 2006 and 7. So I had experience in trading currencies and commodities. And I used that skill to self-fund all of our projects. I did try to raise some money to get to a better position because I had grandiose dreams of, you know, building a Coinbase or a BitPay and having 100 employees that were working on hardware related to Bitcoin and putting a giant Bitcoin logo on the building right there in Silicon Valley. And that never happened. A set of unfortunate events, as that movie says, you know, wildfires in North California and deaths and the market moving just prevented that from happening.
So during that time, were you working with the Army or when was that?
Okay. So my father was a intelligence officer in the Marines. And so I was raised in an intelligence community household. A lot of people in America are raised in military households, and I was raised in a military household, but there are people who are raised in intelligence community household, which is sort of the same, but on another level, very different. And so when you're raised by spies, there's certain things that happen in your house and things that are not talked about and things that are talked about. And so I was raised in that environment. And then in 2013, 14, I was actively trying to communicate with the Department of Defense for a defense contract, because I believe the Bitcoin was going to be used in the future Space Force, which wasn't created at the time, the cyber military, the space military. And I believe that Bitcoin was going to be an essential tool to sanctions, World War III stuff, cybersecurity. Hackers were using it. Figured governments and militaries were going to need to know how it worked. And so I put my feelers out saying, man, we could get a defense contract if we teach the military how to use Bitcoin. And if they like Bitcoin, they won't hurt Bitcoin, might keep it safer. And so I had those feelers out there, but I was getting very little response. And in 2014, Bitcoin Kinetics, me and Anthony and a couple other employees presented to Intel Corporation, and we pitched putting Bitcoin in the Intel chip in 2014 for mining and building full nodes into their circuitry, actually at a silicon chip level. So using the Internet of Things devices to embed Bitcoin software into it. And we presented to Intel Capital. We asked for $20 million from Intel Capital. And the hour after we hung up with Intel's chief of the cloud and big data, as well as the president of Intel, not the CEO, the hour I hung up, about 30 minutes later, the U.S. Army called me on the phone. And they basically told me, don't talk to them anymore. Come talk to us. And that was kind of a shock, because I was asking Intel for money and I was trying to make a partnership with Intel at the time, because they were the hardware company and we were the Bitcoin hardware company. And I figured that would get us our money. And then about 3 weeks later of not communicating, Intel was sanctioned by the federal government for selling chips to China, because those chips were being used to break nuclear codes. And so it became very aware to me that there was cyber war stuff that we were going to interfere with if we made a deal and put Bitcoin in Intel's hand at the time. So I was told by the Army to not do that. And then I went and built a relationship with the Army, Department of Defense, the Pentagon. And I was invited in 2016, years later, to the Mad Scientist Conference for the U.S. Army Training and Doctrine Command. And I presented to the U.S. Army Chief of Staff about how Bitcoin would be used in the future in the battlefield. I did a 30-minute presentation called the Operational Environment of 2040, and basically talked about how Bitcoin, drones, 3D printing, AI, these off-the-wall technologies will be used by 2040 by every military, and the operational environment the military operates in will change. And if we don't know how Bitcoin works, like we don't know how AI works, someone will kick our ass. And so I did these hypothetical, they call it war gaming. So there are plenty of people like the gold guy that all the Bitcoin guys hate on. I can't.
Peter Schiff?
Yeah. He used to do war gaming, and a couple other people like him used to do war gaming on gold for the Department of Defense. So if a country gets this much gold or this much gold, or hides gold or buys gold, this is the outcome of war. And so I did war gaming on Bitcoin. If a country gets Bitcoin, they get this Bitcoin, they buy Bitcoin, they say, fuck you, we have Bitcoin. This is going to cause war this way. So we did a lot of scenarios that way. And that was based on a lot of white papers and theories I was pontificating and philosophizing on. And the military liked that. So they hired me as a mad scientist at the Mad Scientist Initiative. And I became the under-the-table de facto advisor for Department of Defense and U.S. Army on Bitcoin for many years. And that ended up putting me in bunkers and underground skiffs and doing classified work for the military that years later, and not even yet, will come out. But a lot of my work revolved around BitSwitch, which made Bitcoin ATMs use Bitcoin, which is basically the root of some of the ransomware things like WannaCry. And a lot of my previous work on the voting protocol was what I was presenting to prevent voting from getting hacked by a foreign power, or allow soldiers in the military to use the Bitcoin blockchain to vote overseas. And West Virginia ended up doing that in a federal election, and the military has used a version of it, Congress to vote. They call that votes, VOATZ, and so a lot of the ideas and white papers I put out ended up becoming a project that the military took up and used for their own accord. I didn't really get any credit for it or anything like that, but in the military they have a saying called WOP. It means without pay. You do it for your patriotic duty, you know, and it's kind of bullshit. But I did contribute there, you know, and so that relationship was still to this day very strong. And during that time, in 2016, while I was doing that presentation, I stopped using local Bitcoins because the tools to turn Bitcoin into dollars became a little bit more accessible, like the BitPay debit card, and there was no Cash App yet and things like that, or Strike, but there were ways to convert Bitcoin to dollars much easier. And up until that point, the only way if a business didn't accept Bitcoin was to convert it on local Bitcoins using a plethora of methods. And so I did that for years. I was apparently the most prolific over-the-counter Bitcoin trader in California at the time and didn't know that. And I traded with thousands of people across the West Coast. And Homeland Security ended up buying Bitcoin with me using local Bitcoin years later.
Do a buy, like how does this? I remember. There was a guy in front of Fry's Electronics up here, and he was some Asian dude, and he was just with his phone, and then people would line up. And I remember asking my buddy who got me into Bitcoin, because we went there, and I was like, I wonder what that guy's doing. He's like, dude, he's selling Bitcoin, man. And I'm like,
yeah. And so
walk us through about how does that go down, you know, like.
Okay, so this is why I made the Bitcoin ATM, so that you wouldn't need a person there to do that anymore. And when I failed at pitching that to Intel, the software, I open sourced the software. So 100 Bitcoin ATM companies showed up after that, and they took the code and ran with it. RoboCoin was one of the first Bitcoin ATMs, Lamasu and Genesis. They all told me that they use BitSwitch code to make their ATMs work. So I was in a world at the time where there weren't ATMs everywhere. I made the thing in my garage in 2010. So I needed to convert Bitcoin. So you'd put an ad on local Bitcoins. You say, I accept NetSpend, Green Dot, money orders, cash in a bank account, when you could deposit in someone else's account at the time, and all these methods. I would put Bitcoin in the wallet, and there would be limits, $100, $500 on what method you could order from. If you ordered $300 of Bitcoin from me, it took $300 of Bitcoin out of my wallet and put it into the local Bitcoin's escrow wallet. If you sent me that money order or that NetSpend code or that Green Dot code, and I deposited it and I got my dollars, I'd push release escrow, and then the Bitcoin would go to your wallet. And if you didn't pay me in a certain amount of time, the escrow released back to me. And this was to prevent people from robbing each other. So it was a very useful over-the-counter tool, but it was in the Netherlands. And so at the time, there was no federal government in the United States code, law, rule, or expression of opinion on Bitcoin being money, commodity, currency. Other than the IRS saying it was property, there was no financial definition of Bitcoin yet. And so, in my understanding, selling Bitcoin was like selling Pokemon cards or a car or a bike or marbles. It was a thing, and it was my thing. And I've sold plenty of MP3s because I'm a musician, and I know those are my MP3s that I own the copyright and production rights for, and they're a digital thing. And I sold them, and I never needed a license to sell my MP3s. But the federal government in 2014 at FinCEN, Financial Crime Enforcement Network, said you need a money transmitter license to sell Bitcoin for $4. So they de facto defined Bitcoin as money. And I ended up selling Bitcoin to an undercover Homeland Security agent on local Bitcoins, $9,260. He tried to entrap me and sent me $14,500 cash when I told him to send me 9 $1,000 money orders. So he had receipts so that he couldn't get robbed, because if I died, he needed to have a receipt. If I just disappeared, he needed to have a receipt. Told him to give me his ID because it's more than $2,000. That's the Know Your Customer law. Told him we can't do more than $10,000. That's anti-money laundering, suspicious activity reports. And because I told him that, I was following the federal law. But at that time, there was no public record of it being told, this is money. And so I knew financial law. I knew that some financial laws needed to be followed, but there was no law federally, even to this day, saying that Bitcoin is money. And so I was not under the impression that I was breaking any rules. because at the time I was working with the Department of Defense and the Pentagon, and you can't break any rules with them, especially when you're trying to get a defense contract. And so you got to be squeaky clean. So there was no way I was trying to mess that up, because it was way more than $9,000 I was going to get from that. Secondly, Homeland Security decided that it was their position of power to go police all the Bitcoiners. The FBI didn't, the CIA didn't, the NSA didn't. It was Homeland Security that felt they were going to go after Bitcoin because they had the position to do it. It's not the IRS. No one's done that yet. It was Homeland Security. So they decided to start arresting not just me, but other people who were selling Bitcoin and local Bitcoins. And they arrested someone in each district: the Southern District, Central District, California, Eastern District in New York. They went after Charlie Shrem, the incident in New York. And they went after a couple people in the West Coast. There were 8 people arrested initially, and all of them were put in jail at some point. I was the 9th person arrested. And the reason that they arrested me, and no different than the 8 people before, was not because I was trading significantly, but because of who I was in the Bitcoin community and my Bitcoin developer status.
So wait,
what?
Real quick, how did they then trap you then? How did they, or how did, you know what I mean? Like, they said they sent you more money than you had.
Yeah. So, I get a box in the mail, not of $9,000 in money orders, but $14,500 cash. So I communicated with this person who I didn't know was Homeland Security agent at the time. Said, "Why'd you send me more money? We can't do that. So I'm only sending you $9,000 in Bitcoin." So that's what we agreed to. And he told me, "Well, what are you going to do with the other $5,000? I go, "Well, I can't even send that back to you. Sending cash in the mail is illegal, and you sent me cash. You shouldn't have done that, especially that amount. So I can't send that back to you. I'll give you $9,000 in Bitcoin. Wait a week. It'll be worth 15 grand because the price was moving that much." I gave him 10 Bitcoin for $9,000. So you can do the math and figure out how much it was. And it significantly moved after that. So he goes, "Well, what are you going to do with this 5 grand?" I said, "You just lost it. You're an idiot. You sent someone more money than you should have sent." And he goes, "Are you going to keep it as a fee?" I go, "No, I just can't move it now. So I'm going to send you this much Bitcoin because that's all I can legally send you. And that's all I agreed to send you. I'm going to give you more of my Bitcoin. And it'll be worth 15 grand. So if you would have waited a week, you would have paid me for that much anyway." And because of that, they said that I contained a 35% fee and that I was now a business. So that was the form of entrapment. He tried to say he was a pothead, and I was a cannabis user at the time. And I was in American for Safe Access and Normal. So he was like trying to imply that he was a federally illegal drug person and that I was taking his marijuana proceeds. And he never said any of that to me. But later when they indicted me, they said that he was a pothead and that I was taking his money, which came from cannabis in some form or some way. And he was using the Bitcoin he bought for me to buy a Tenasium, which is a hash oil extractor, which he never told me any of that. I had no idea what a Tenasium was at the time. And I used to grow weed. So they used me as case law for not just Bitcoin, but for weed, and tried to connect the two together, which was my fault for, when you're a pot farmer, you don't have guns. They don't like guns and pot together. And when you're a Bitcoiner, they don't like weed and guns. In association with that, the federal government will use one of those against the other. I was naive that would happen, but that's what happened. And so that brought me into federal court. I was arrested.
So wait. During that time, like when you got busted, right? Like, how did they go about? Like, I'm worried. Like, what do you do with your keys? You know what I mean? Like, what do you do with that shit? Like, what happens? How do you keep that shit safe? If these
okay, so they never seized Bitcoin or asked me for Bitcoin. They never, they told me I made illegal proceeds from years of unlicensed business. And so they said, "You owe us now $80,000 from running a business without a license, a fine." That made really no sense to me. But it's like fishing for 10 years without a fishing license. They can charge me $80,000 because I fished this much fish over 10 years without a fishing license. That was all an assumption. And they had no idea how much business I did other than what local Bitcoin said. And the price of Bitcoin had changed so much over those years that their measurement of the value of it was off the wall, stupid wrong. That tractor driving. So basically, at the time, I was using local Bitcoins, which basically did not have a private key. It was an exchange that held Bitcoin for you, and you logged in to access it. Also, I was using plenty of other Bitcoin tools and wallets, and I experimented with every wallet that has ever been made, hardware and software. And to the point, every hardware wallet that was ever made was sitting with me in a military facility, making sure it functioned properly. At the time, Bitcoin miners, were sitting in a military facility, and we were penetration testing them to see if Antminer and the Chinese military was hacking into people's miners, which was happening. And before segregated witness came out, we had ASIC boost, which was allowing Antminers to cheat and basically have less power consumption than everyone else's miners. And the nullification of ASIC boost was segregated witness, which forked Bitcoin into Bitcoin Cash, and all this chaos ensued, and the blockchain wars and the block size wars all happened. But what most people don't understand is that that was a military thing going on, that there was ASIC boost in the chips that was being patented and being used by the Chinese military. And I was working with our military trying to understand what was going on at the time on that level to see if this hardware is non-FCC regulated hardware in the US was allowing the doors to be open to the Chinese military onto our networks. There's a lot of layering of that, but that's the stuff that the Bitcoin plebs don't understand was going on at the time. Life and death shit, not just making money. And I presented at the time in 2016 to not just the chief of staff, but Vice President Mike Pence on the Bitcoin network being the largest computer network on Earth, and using SHA-256, the same algorithm that the nuclear warheads are protected by, and the potential that the Chinese military wasn't just using Intel chips to hack into nuclear codes, but they were potentially building a giant supercomputer using Bitcoin miners to break SHA-256, which would make our nuclear warheads very problematic. And so those are the kind of things I was working on, and trying to prevent bad things from happening, and trying to defend Bitcoin as a thing, but also not let Bitcoin be used as a thing that would harm your mom and me and our neighbors, And so that's where my head was. The trading was very much just to keep me alive and keep my company self-funded. And there was this point where Homeland Security decided to put me in the news and use me as case law for Bitcoin money instead of Bitcoin commodity or Bitcoin property. And I felt like that was going to be an even bigger attack, is that was going to cause harm to Bitcoin in the long run. And I think there are plenty of records of me saying that these bankers and financial bros are going to come in and destroy Bitcoin, and they're going to say all this shit, and they're going to destroy the companies that existed non-KYC, and they're going to come in and they're also going to attack developers and say, if you don't work for us, you're a bad developer. And all of that is now happening. And the only reason I didn't really get enough attention for talking about that is because the Homeland Security Department put me as a bad guy up in court. And I think if that never would have happened, Bitcoin would have been in a better position right now. And a lot of the developers that I was working with were very soft-tongued and didn't want to talk about these things. And they didn't want to talk to the public. And now, as of this week, we're seeing Bitcoin developers get attacked by each other and by podcasters and by news people.
Yeah,
there's just an endless amount of divide and conquer,
Yeah, we were talking about this at the meetup last night, where it was like, like everybody's just starting to attack everybody, and it's like as a pleb, like I don't know who to believe, right? But it's one of those, obviously don't trust, verify. But it's incredible just seeing like the infighting in Bitcoin right now that's happening.
Well, I'll tell you right now, everyone thinks Reagan came up with that saying, but he didn't. It was the KGB and it was the Russians. And don't trust, verify is bullshit to me, because there is no verification. There has been so much bullshit put in the Bitcoin blockchain. There's so much false conversations and records. You could go say that the devil doesn't exist and put it in a Bitcoin transaction, and that doesn't mean it's verified that it's there. I mean, people put porn and the Bible and all kinds of shit in Bitcoin transactions. That doesn't make it reality. And then you have all these pontification people of Bitcoin. Some of them said truthful things. Even Roger Ver and Eric Voorhees and Charlie Shrem, some of these original people who were there when I was there, they said very honest, truthful things. But you had a group of people say, well, his opinion is wrong and we're going to attack him. and that's happened to me. Is my opinion is wrong, we're going to attack me. Just why? Because I promoted the second layer of Bitcoin, Counterparty, which is what Blockstream does with Liquid, and is what Square does with the Lightning Network. I was here long before that shit promoting the first version of that. And what's wrong with that? And so to be called a shitcoiner because of that is bullshit, because Vitalik made up the maximalism thing because of people like Max Kaiser and people like me. I wasn't promoting shitcoins. I was promoting Bitcoin. I was building things on Bitcoin. But to have people attack me on that position just because I was a scientist and I understand how things work in the Bitcoin community, I understand how the Bitcoin code works, I understand how the algorithms work, how many people don't, like to talk to the wind, And so I feel that Bitcoin is being attacked by idiots, not smart people, but by idiots. The smart people in the room are the ones always being attacked, and the developers are being attacked. But I wasn't the only person arrested. There were the developer here at Airbit's Edge. They were arrested too, and there were plenty of people across the country who were arrested and attacked.
So real quick, we got 3 minutes on this thing, but what we could do is we could stop and then I could just edit it back or whatnot.
Okay.
All right. So where were we? What you guys were asked for. So you were pretty much dead in the water at that point from the way I could see it. Cause it's like, what the fuck are you going to do? You already got the fucking money at that point, right?
Well, no, I've been asked a few very serious questions since all this happened. And one of them was, well, what if you just never sent the Bitcoin? And that this cash just showed up in a mailbox and like an idiot. And I refused to send the Bitcoin because you sent me too much money. I don't know what would have happened if that would have happened.
Yeah, I mean, I never thought about that, I guess.
I don't want to be an asshole ever to anyone. I was never trying to rob anyone ever in my life. It's not on my moral compass or my moral clock. But I told this person, like, why'd you do that? Someone else would have robbed you, man. You can't send cash to people. That's dumb. And I literally told this Homeland Security agent, thinking it was a dumb kid, like, don't do that. You're going to get robbed next time. I'm going to send you something that we agreed to, but don't do that. That's stupid. And I should have just actually been a fucking asshole and just not send him anything, and I probably would be a free man. So I don't know. It makes me question my morality, and being a good person and a good human may have shot me in the foot. Being an asshole, and there's always a losing person on the side of a trade. Being a trader, I should have just said, "Fuck you! You traded wrong, and I took your money." But that could have turned out bad. And, I have a soul, so my soul's still intact, but it's in the past now, so I just don't trade Bitcoin over the counter anymore. It's just not a business I'm in anymore. There's plenty of other places to do it now.
What happened after they busted you, man? Give us.
I went to Henderson prison for 2 weeks. I was working with the mayor of Las Vegas, the governor of Nevada, and Senator Heller, Alex Sandoval, governor at the time, on getting Bitcoin legalized as a thing that would be used in the slot machines in casinos. I had Bitcoin Inc. started in 2016 and became the CEO of Bitcoin Inc. in Nevada, so that I can, from a pedestal, push Bitcoin to the casinos and push Bitcoin to the Department of Defense using the Bitcoin Inc. as the corporate entity. And because I didn't want them working with Ethereum, I wanted them working with Bitcoin. And so I made Bitcoin Inc. so that they would have a relationship with Bitcoin. And corporations are how this country works. And so I did the doing business as Bitcoin, which made me owner of Bitcoin Inc., and it all looked good on paper. And I have the biggest LinkedIn Bitcoin company in the world now. There's like 250,000 people that say they work at Bitcoin Inc. on there, which is stupid because anyone that's in Bitcoin is like, yeah, I work there. So it's and the military was like, good optics. That was cool. And so I was astonished while I was in prison for those 2 weeks that my lawyers, David Chesnoff and Richard Schoenfeld, who were not my lawyers at the time, didn't know who they were, showed up and basically got me out of jail, and didn't know who they were. They were Oscar Goodwin, the mayor of Las Vegas's old lawyer. Let's see, Dan Blazarian, Bruno Mars, Britney Spears, Paris Hilton, the Gambinos, the Hells Angels.
They just showed up out of nowhere, though? Like the lawyer?
Yeah, so those are the lawyers of all those people.
Yeah.
I think the mayor called him and sent him. I was working with Derek Stevens, who owns a D and now owns Circa, these big casinos that had the first Bitcoin ATMs on Fremont Street. And he got the key to the city from the mayor. You know, there's still an old boys club in Vegas. And I used to drink and talk to Derek Stevens every day. And I maintained the Bitcoin ATM on his casino floor because he wasn't allowed to touch it. I lived in the penthouse there for a year. And I was working at the D daily on the Bitcoin thing. I actually almost cut BitPay off and had Edge here white label their wallet as a point of sale called Bitcoin Pay, and almost was like a week from having the D give up on BitPay and start using Edge Bitcoin Pay as their point of sale to accept Bitcoin at the casino. And then I got arrested. So because that was the relationship I was having at the time, I had the chief financial officer and the comptroller of the D casino meeting with me the week before I was arrested. I think they sent the lawyers and said, "Hey, come get this guy, and we need him not to go to jail. He was working with us." And so that was an eye opener to me on my friends, and who, you know, you have friends in low places that I had no idea, you know. And so they defended me. They put me out on bond. And for a year, I was fighting my case. Maybe 9 hearings I went. They extradited me to San Diego, where the case was brought out of, even though I was arrested in Nevada, because the Homeland Security agent was here in San Diego, and they want to use the border as their hunting ground for Bitcoin, crossing the fence and the airports and such. So they wanted the Southern District of California to be where this case was drawn out of. And so I was just used like a fucking Barbie doll as a plaything by everyone. And being the hot chick in the room sucks sometimes, you know? And so I was put on probation. I was a pot smoker for 17 years, was told can't smoke weed anymore. Had MS, so I needed to smoke weed. Children's Hospital told me to smoke weed when I was 16. So I've been smoking weed ever since. So the federal government cut me off from this habit of being a pothead, which was heavy for my mind. Had to go to these court hearings every couple weeks. It was very stressful. The Bitcoin community rallied around me at the time, which was really an honor, which I did not expect. And then I continued on the advice of my lawyers to keep working on the Bitcoin projects that I was working on. And one of them was Bitcointopia. And Bitcointopia was the city project where I was planning on building a data center full of full nodes in Nevada that would have offices there that would allow Bitcoin companies to come all be in the same office building. And we'd have a data center full of nodes and miners. And this massive amount of full nodes and miners would prevent a dedicated denial of service attack on the Bitcoin network. And it would be used as a software as a service cloud renting out of nodes to people, because not everyone could run a Raspberry Pi node. And then we were going to do what Google Cloud and Amazon AWS did with the Bitcoin nodes. And so I started building Bitcointopia, which was the name of our data center at the time. But it became the name of the environment we were building, the city and the streets and the offices that we were building, and all of that was called Bitcointopia. But was working on this since 2014. And the initial iteration of it was in North California, and we called it Blockchain Valley. But the county burned down habitually over 3-4 months. Worst wildfires in California history. So we had to move, and we went to Nevada. And then we decided to pick up the pace and try to make Nevada the home for Bitcoin companies. And so that was what I was focused on. I had a wink and a nod from the U.S. Army to do so. And it was going to be something that interacted and contracted with military bases in Salt Lake City, military bases in Nevada, military contracts. We were going to maybe give a piece of this data center to the military to do research with. So I had a lot of big players that were interested in this project. So the lawyers told me to keep working on it, because if I just gave up on working on Bitcoin projects because I was indicted for selling Bitcoin, it would make me look bad or something, which, you know, it was just a stressful environment. I should have just stopped, and I should have just, you know, kicked up my feet and focused. But I went to work every day. I promoted Bitcointopia. I was selling parcels of land that were going to be homes that prospective people who wanted to work at our company would live at, the same way SpaceX is building Starbase and bought houses to employ their employees to build the spaceships in Boca Chica, Texas. And the same way El Salvador is building a city now called Bitcoin City that would allow miners and nodes to be there and businesses to move there in a tax-free environment. So Nevada had Bitcoin tax exemption for the state, county, and cities. And so that's why I was building that there. And up until the night before my trial was to begin, where I came to San Diego, I had no idea that it was going to be used against me in any way. And the night before trial, I was arrested by the same Homeland Security agent that bought Bitcoin from me years before here in San Diego. And they charged me with wire fraud. And what that pertained to was the website of Bitcointopia promoting it as a new residential area. They said that there was a description of a picture on the website that said 500 to 1,000 acres residential area. And they could not find that amount of acreage in my name or the business's name because that amount of acreage had not been purchased yet. That was our plan in the middle of a 10,000 acre piece of dirt that no one really had, that was all for sale. And we were buying it up quietly as best as possible so that the prices were not going to be manipulated. Same thing Disney did when he bought the 26,000 acres of Walt Disney World under 5 shell companies. So no one knew Disney was buying land, so no one ripped them off. And so I was following that method to try to buy as much of this land as possible to build this environment, this city, this business park. And they basically said, when I was put in jail that night, you're going to not say no to this plea deal, which I already said no to 2 plea deals, and I was ready to go to the Supreme Court. And they said, no, you're going to take the plea deal because Homeland Security agent doesn't want to testify. He'll lose his undercover status. And you're going to plead to this wire fraud charge, or we're going to come after your friends and family and your coworkers and things like that. And that level of intimidation and threatening was not something I experienced yet. And so I didn't want anyone else to be involved. So after about 2 months of sitting in federal prison for that new superseded indictment, 2 trials now, I was advised to give up. And I paid $200,000+ in Bitcoin to these lawyers for them to tell me, we don't want another $100,000. We want you to give up. And so when a lawyer turns down that much money and says you need to stop, they're going to just keep making shit up about you. That's what I did. I stopped and I gave up and I took the plea deal. And 5 months later, I was sentenced. And then I spent 2 years in federal prison. And I got released in the middle of COVID on April 2020 in the economic ruins of the world. And it was fucking traumatic. And now I am ordered by the federal government to pay the $120,000 forfeiture and restitution related to my money transmission case and Bitcointopia. All financial things that were basically made up and fluffed up in value to make a significant fine, which doesn't have any basis in reality of what really happened. But I have a $120,000 fine, paid about $4,000 of it off, just to make sure I make my minimum payments, which is part of probation. And the federal government has me peeing in a cup 3 times a week to make sure I'm not a pothead anymore. They have me going to drug programs, which I've never been a drug user or an alcoholic of any kind, but I have to do that for probation. And I'm ordered to now pay $117,000, the remainder of the fine, in full. And I have to go to a hearing tomorrow to explain the status of that payment being made or not, which it has not been made. The difficulties of handing Bitcoin to the government doesn't exist. They won't take Bitcoin. Selling Bitcoin for cash is not something I could do anymore, but the federal government has literally asked me to sell my Bitcoin that I have now to pay the fine that they gave me for selling Bitcoin. I still have 5 acres in my name, which I was building my house in the Bitcointopia area for myself. And maybe I could sell that land to pay the government's fine off, but that's also the second charge they put me in jail for, was selling land. So I am told to pay this fine in full. And because I can't give them cash, because the county clerk doesn't take more than $1,000 cash, I can't give them Bitcoin. They don't take Bitcoin. They want a cashier's check. So I've found it very difficult to turn $100,000 of Bitcoin into a cashier's check. And because I have been unable to do that, could go to jail tomorrow for not making the payment in time. I don't know exactly if that's contempt of court. I've been willing to make payments. But when you are unwilling and then you have the ability to, but you don't, they could put you in jail for, contempt, not paying when you can.
So starting off with them setting you up to begin with, like, why do you think they did that? Like, what were you? Well, what's their game theory there?
So it's we're intelligent people. We live in a very conspiratorial world, and we know there's some fucking evil dirtbags that have agendas and plans. But it's not always nefarious. There's always stupidity more than nefariousness. And so it's very simple. Homeland Security agent wanted a job, wanted a raise. Prosecutor wanted a job when Trump was firing everyone at the DOJ, wanted a job, wanted a raise, needed a good case. It's very simple like that. But then the strings behind all that could probably lead to the fact that I was a Bitcoin core developer, that I made a machine that everyone on Earth can use to turn Bitcoin into currency and currency into Bitcoin. And just like people who use Bitcoin in the intelligence community, whether they were like Julian Assange or Edward Snowden or Chelsea Manning, all these people are Bitcoiners. Aaron Schwartz, who rest in peace, was the creator of Reddit, and all of these big developer, hacker, computer, internet people were Bitcoiners. And it's as simple as taking the people off the face of the earth, putting them in a box or killing them, because they are the combatants to the system and the powers that be, And I'm not an anarchist. I signed corporate paperwork. I filed patents for Bitcoin in 2010. I did everything I can to follow the old archaic common law British system that we live in the United States. But I made a mistake by not filing a license. I made a mistake by advertising to the public. And that I was attacked by. But, Julian Assange had to accept Bitcoin, and Satoshi told him, no, you're going to make people come after us. Well, it went after Charlie Shrem and Edward Snowden and all these people who are Bitcoin proponents, because that's all they have. That's all we have when you're fighting an authoritarian power. Bitcoin's the only thing you have to eat and survive and get paid with without getting cut off. And if we didn't have Bitcoin, imagine there'd be a lot more dead people and a lot more people in prison. But I think that's why. I mean, I was a very vocal, and not as much as I am these days, but I was a very vocal person. The prosecutor said I'm a Bitcoin evangelical, which means, even he knew that I was the person talking about Bitcoin the most. And if he's saying that in a federal courtroom, maybe that's why, because I talked and I was a public person. And I had a lot of friends in the Bitcoin community, more than any of the modern post-2016 plebs would even know, and I know everyone. I had people sleeping on my couch who might be some of the original creators, like Wei Day and Nick Szabo and Adam Back and David Kleiman and Hal Finney. And I talked to those, and so
You cut out. Was that your headphones?
I got a phone call right there. I had to.
Oh, okay.
I had to cancel. Hold on. Sorry about that.
Okay,
So I've been there since the beginning. You know what I mean? And because of that, I was just on the chopping.
Oh shit! Another phone call.
So many people. I don't know how many years you've been involved in Bitcoin.
You cut out. I didn't hear you.
How many people do you know? Because I don't know how many years you've been in Bitcoin. How many people do you know from the origins of Bitcoin, from the 2009-8 era, are still here, are still talking, are still
like the people, the guy that got me into Bitcoin, his guy that got him into Bitcoin, that guy's like off in some island, like he's in the Thailand or some shit. Like
so let me ask you that. Even though you're the interviewer. So let me ask you this. Do you think that because of the amount of wealth that has come into Bitcoin, that the people who were there from the beginning, who were early adopters, who had a Bitcoin on the cheap and now it was worth so much, do you think it was good for that amount of money to show up to make those original people who knew the game, who knew the characters, to just leave? Or should they have stuck around no matter how much money was raised? Because because now where's the thought leaders? There's all this talk that Bitcoin doesn't need you, which is a load of bullshit. Bitcoin does need people. It needs developers. It needs kids constantly learning to be a Bitcoin core developer because people die and get old and get tired. And who's going to replace Vladimir? And who's going to replace, Gavin? And Vladimir did. And who did Gavin replace? Satoshi and Hal and David Kleiman because they died. Like, who's going to replace the next person? And I know there's I can't put his name. I don't know exactly his name, but I know there's a guy that's doing the work that I was doing. He's making beer floats take Bitcoin Lightning payments. And that's my work, but that's great that someone's doing it because I'm not doing it anymore. And who's doing voting and DeFi stuff? I was doing voting. You can go type in BitCongress voting on Google and see hundreds of universities talking about my white paper with my name on it. Because
I have this Bitcoin handcuffs theory, where like the golden handcuffs, where people either get paid too well and get like put away in a corner. It's like, oh, we don't want to hear you. Just here's some money, and then go, dick around with whatever. Just be quiet, right? It's money to quiet people. And I think that's definitely going on in the environment right now because, a lot of people.
I was asked to go to Zug, Switzerland by Charles Hoskin and Joseph Lubin, the Goldman Sachs dicks that think they created Ethereum. And when I said no, and countless other people said no, they threw Vitalik in there from Bitcoin Magazine. And I didn't want to get no golden handcuffs then, and I sure as hell don't now. But I understand exactly what you're saying.
Old is old. No, but that's what's scary to me, like about your case too. Like when I first started hearing about your case was that first original you got set up. I think you were on Mad Bitcoins.
Yeah, Thomas was my friend. And World Crypto Network and all those guys. We were doing before podcasts. We were talking and we were trying to spread ideas, but there was a lot of infighting even then, and people talking shit to each other and didn't like each other's political opinions and this and that. But we still worked for Bitcoin though, and it's no different than how many people at Google or Facebook talk shit to each other while they're all working on Facebook and Google. This is what happens when you build an industry or a company. And that was what I was trying to do, was make sure we were all together still, no matter what kind of infighting is happening, that we had the infrastructure and the incentives to pay developers, to have an office to work together, to not do this over Zoom, but have coffee with each other in person like the Facebook, Google, and Amazon employees do. Why can't we do that as Bitcoiners? This decentralization of business is nonsense. This decentralization of people is nonsense. The network is decentralized only somewhat, and that still is not the point. The point is, this is an idea that we were all working on together, and it's a community thing, or it's a company thing, or it's a civilization thing. But none of those 3 C words matter to these motherfuckers anymore. It's all profit. And that's the problem is, okay, if we had a company like Google that was working solely on Bitcoin and we were profitable, we would be able to have an unlimited Black American Express credit card on the stock market. We'd be able to get all the money from the Federal Reserve we want to keep building Bitcoin. Why can't we do that? And that's what I tried to do. And there are motherfuckers that did not like me for saying that shit. And they did not want me working with the military or with the casinos or with the banks, who is what all of Coinbase and Strike and Cash App and BitPay, they all work with the banks. So why do you people use them anyway? And so all of the vilification that was said to me over the years for me being a bad guy, for me being charged with fraud for Bitcointopia, or me promoting tokens and the tokenization of data on Counterparty, or they would say I'm a shitcoiner or some shit because of that. All that stuff means nothing to me because they're all idiots saying it. There's not one intelligent person with a higher IQ than me telling me that. And so I don't care about that. But that is a repeating message to the whole community going, we need to vilify the smartest dude in the room. Military hires smart people, they go kill them in the battlefield. It's just a sad reality of our world. Do the Bitcoin community get the smartest people up on a pedestal and they have the best ideas? They take those ideas and they kill the person. Like, what do you think? Like, this idea machine should not just be spitting out more ideas? I was an idea machine and a philosopher. And what, are you going to just go kill Aristotle, Plato, and Socrates because they said a thing you didn't like? Like, that was your core philosopher. I was the core philosopher of Bitcoin for a time. And especially when it came to technology and futurism and what could we do? And I totally at this egotistical point in my life where I could say I developed so much shit that so many companies in the Bitcoin industry are using, and I got no credit for it. But I'm totally okay with that. As long as those ideas get made, that's all that matters. But to vilify a person because of their opinions or something, or to vilify a person because the federal government said something about them is insane to me. Because
Right.
like I shared this thing with you where even someone who was a Bitcointopia customer was like, how is it that they're going to the federal government to throw Morgan in jail when we were the ones saying we don't want the federal government involved in our lives? It's weird optics to have one of my old employees who I was paying to go tell Homeland Security that Bitcointopia is not real. Morgan hasn't shared any data with me. This guy I never even officially hired, that I paid money to have him come work at Bitcointopia, who never showed up, ended up being a rat for the federal government and saying all this lying bullshit about Bitcointopia because I never showed him customer data and I never showed him anything, and he never signed an employee contract or an NDA with me, and he didn't like that. So he went and he squealed like a little pig, and in prison we call those people snitches, you know. And when you're snitching, what are you snitching on? I wasn't doing anything wrong, but do you think that someone at Google that steals their private customer data and goes and gives it away, do you think that person's going to have a job or be trustworthy anymore? Like there's a thing about whistleblowing, and there's also a thing about sabotage. And so I've had plenty of people over the years sabotage me because I was too kind-hearted and I let too many people that I didn't know and understand that I thought they loved Bitcoin like me get too close, whether they were in my office or my house. And there's a problem with the idea that we're all focused on Bitcoin, so we're all good people, which is not true. And there's also a problem that we're all working on Bitcoin, so we're all bad people, which that's not true either. And every developer that has an opinion is not a bad guy because they have an opinion. But that's what's happening right now in the Bitcoin community. You're going to see every Bitcoin developer quit. You're going to see every Bitcoin company get bought out by BlackRock and Goldman Sachs. And you're going to see every Bitcoin podcaster, which I hope to God they don't come for you too, man. But you're going to have everyone get sponsored by fucking Spotify. And then what happens? You know what I mean?
Oh,
and
no,
so
here, fuck that.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
There's no reason that's not going to happen. It's called war. And I'd like to say my role in Bitcoin was the war person, because everyone thought this was money and software. And I came into it going, oh God, this is bombs and security and Terminator and weapons and cyber war.
Yeah,
I looked at,
you know, it's a weaponization too of like hurting people's integrity, right? Where it's like,
oh
hey,
yeah,
you just say, oh well, fucking A, B, and C. This guy does A, B, and C.
oh, I'll never get a job in the Bitcoin industry. I'll never get a job in America as a felon. I'm unemployable now, and I've been self-employed since I was 12. So I haven't had a paycheck since I was 20 from anyone, and I'm 35. So just do the math on how I've survived in this country that well, and I can still put a suit and tie on, you know. But how are you supposed to survive in an industry that eats you? You know, I'm sure there's plenty of original Google people that are not at Google anymore. Same shit happened there. There's plenty of people that were hardcore Army, Department of Defense people. They're like, I don't want to be there anymore. That place is a shit show. So it's just a general consensus that our society is falling apart, and every little thing is going to fall apart with it, you know, including the community and the companies and the civilizations. Like, I hate it. I love Bitcoin so much. I got Bitcoin tattooed on my arm, you know, it's going to be with me when I'm in a fucking box underground. But the people have changed face so much. I don't, like you said, I'm not a pleb. I don't like that word, but I respect the pleb, you know. But I don't know who the fuck to trust anymore myself in this Bitcoin industry, in this Bitcoin space. And there are so many people that think I'm some fucking scammer or some shit because I went to jail. I do believe the federal government and some news instead of me, you know? Like, that's weird.
About you or whatever, and it's like, okay, well.
Yeah, how do you base someone's integrity, or how do you base someone's characterization on information you read over the internet? I mean, I've done 100 interviews long before I was even arrested, and all those get buried by some news about Bitcointopia. But no one even knows what happened to Bitcointopia other than you and this interview right here. This is the only time I've even talked about any of that really in the public post the whole situation. But I'm going to keep building Bitcointopia. Just never going to sell anything ever again. Never going to sell Bitcoin. I'm never going to sell land. I'm going to own that fucking entire county the fourth largest county in the United States, Elko. I'm going to buy the whole fucking thing one day somehow. I'm not going to sell it to anyone. I'm going to do what Walt Disney did and say, I'm going to charge you a ticket to come here. I should never have given people the opportunity to be a homesteader and have freedom and come there. Because if I was just a greedy piece of shit and tried to turn myself into Walt Disney, that place would be Tomorrowland right now. And I wouldn't have had 4 years of delay. But Bitcointopia to me is my life's work. And I'm not going to give up on it because of this. They may even put me in jail tomorrow for another year or two because of a probation violation. I hope to God not. And I actually have to argue for myself because my lawyer that I have now is a free lawyer that they gave me recently because of California. I'm going to have to defend myself. If I fail at defending myself, I could go to jail. If I don't, I have to live out probation another year or two. But once this is done, I'm not going to abandon this country and go to El Salvador. I'm going to build Bitcointopia, the city of Satoshi, Nevada, with a giant skyscraper in the middle of it like Dubai. And it's just going to be bleeding Bitcoin everywhere. I'm still going to do that. And there's no thing the federal government or anyone could do short of killing me that's going to stop me from building that city. It's going to have a giant horse track in it. It's going to be like the Del Mar Fairgrounds right there in Nevada. It's going to have casinos, and it's going to have hyperloops and roller coasters, and it's going to be fucking cool. So there's no reason I'm going to not do that. I've been attacked. Yeah, the Hyperloop station. There's one in Nevada and Vegas. There needs to be one in Bitcointopia. You know, that was the whole point. I'm going to do that no matter what. So anyone that thinks Bitcointopia was some fucking thing I did to like rob the Bitcoin community or take a couple $1,000s from people because I was trying to build this city, they're insane.
Didn't some guy do that shit in like Wyoming though? Like he was basically trying to fucking get part like people. I don't know. I didn't.
And I'll tell you right now. There's a way to do it properly, and maybe I did it. I will totally admit to all the mistakes I did, but my intentions were clear. I am trying to build a place for all the Bitcoin community to work together, to be together, to live together, and not trying to build some commune of fucking crazy idiot trolls to live together. I want the Bitcoin system, technology, and industry to survive, and it needs infrastructure to do that, whether it's data centers, offices, people in the same proximity to work together. That's my goal, and that's going to happen no matter what. And I'm going to do it here in the United States because I don't want to see my country get destroyed. Bitcoin will save the country. Like I say, Bitcoin fixes this. Bitcoin fixes the United States. But the United States needs to be completely restarted. And that includes building cities and governments and all of that. That's all Bitcointopia was, an experiment to start a new form of government with new technology, with new city infrastructure, to showcase technologies like Epcot and Tomorrowland was supposed to do before Walt died. No one's doing that. I go, why can't I do that? Why can't the Bitcoin community do that? We're the money of the world now. Why don't we pay for it?
Bitcoin Park, but it's not a city. It's just a fucking I don't know.
Yeah, but I mean, cities aren't built. They grow from something. So when I said that, I was trying to give people a vision and a hope of the future that we should be building new cities. And this truck's driving by. My goal would be to build a business, an office, a company, and to have a city grow around that. No different than a city of Las Vegas grew around casinos. I'll put a horse track up there and some hotels, and trust me, a city will grow around it. If you put an office space with a bunch of Bitcoin nodes in it that are now the electrical and monetary center of Nevada, there will be a city that will grow around it. So that's the point: is you plan it, you build it, it will grow. You know,
what would be the power source? Like, where would you guys get your power from?
Well, we had the river. We were gonna use turbines through the river. We were gonna put a massive amount of solar panels out there because Solar City, basically Tesla, their battery factory was just west over there in Reno, and so I had this grandiose plan to work with Tesla and get solar put into Nevada in a very big way. And Harry Reid and the governor now of Nevada fucking scared Elon Musk out of Nevada. That's why he went to Texas and left California too. There's just been so much that has happened that could prevent that from happening at this time. But all it takes is solar. We have molten salt generators right outside of Las Vegas, 3 of them that power the whole strip. And there's plenty of pieces of technology that can be utilized. It just takes money. Bitcoin was, to me, the money to build stuff like that, to do that stuff. Do you think Disney's going to build you a better LA or a better San Diego or a better San Francisco? Like you live in San Francisco, I live there, in the Bay. I live in San Diego at the moment. California cities are going to fall apart. Who's going to rebuild them, or are we going to build new ones in the inner, in Baker and Bakersfield and Modesto and out here where like the desert is, where no one wants to be.
Too, man. There's a lot of people down there, dude. So
what happens? Do we just sit by and let our cities crumble? Do we build a new city? Do we use Bitcoin as this amazing financial thing to create wealth? People like think, well, you can't create wealth with these shit coin tokens and stuff. But you know how many people have? You know how many people have created shit amounts of wealth on OpenSea with shit pictures? Like, so what's the problem with creating wealth to build sidewalks? And so if Bitcoin is the only thing to create wealth, as a maximalist, I think it's the only blockchain that exists. Now, like as a record system and a system revolving around consensus and proof of work, I think it's the only one that works. But what's to say that wealth can't just get created by credit? Like, are Bitcoiners idiots? Do they not know what credit is and debt is? And the best, wealthiest people in the world are wealthy in debt, and they know how to use debt to the best. Like Elon Musk and Bezos borrow against their stock. Like they're in good debt, not bad debt. They know how to manage debt, and that's why they get to do whatever the fuck they want. And so like this idea that like there needs to be gold or silver, like bimetallism, like Bitcoin needs to be the monetary tool, that's dumb. It's not monetary to me at all. It's a computer. It's the largest computer on earth, software. It's accounting. But to put these federal laws that it's money or commodity or security is fucking stupid. That's the kind of shit that puts people like me and other people in jail when you call this thing money, because it's not money. It's property, or it's this,
fucking
or that.
Do whatever they want. Right?
Yeah. Why would you even play that game? You should just walk away and not play any of that. Call it software. Software is free speech. They can't stop that. But money, commodity, currency, those words mean they could stop them and control them. And that's dumb for anyone to even like, when, I hear these arguments, and trust me, I spend Bitcoin on things. I got paid in Bitcoin. But to have someone say that Bitcoin is money, it pisses me off. I argued for a year in court that it's not, to save my ass. And then you have people like Roger Ver that said, well, it's not cash anymore, so we're going to make Bitcoin cash because it's not a currency, it's not cash anymore. And then you have blockstream people trying to say, oh, it's a commodity, it's an asset, we want to hold it and then get value out of it. Like, that's not what we built Bitcoin for. We built Bitcoin to make records and incentivize people to run the blockchain. That's it. That's all it was for. And just because people are getting paid, getting those golden handcuffs, does not mean that's what its purpose is. And it makes you question, like, what do you think the purpose of the Constitution of the United States was? Just to make us a capitalistic fucking consumer society? Or to show people that we can vote on shit? Like, the whole origins of what these things were made to do are not how they're used anymore. And if someone's going to build a Bitcoin city in El Salvador, what do you think that's going to be used for? That's definitely not what I was building it for. I was building it to make the United States the fucking shit. I wasn't building it for Bitcoin. I was building it for the US, and that's what makes me understand that there's a lot of Bitcoin people that don't give a shit about not their family or their city or their country. They care about Bitcoin until Bitcoin fucks them up. Then they don't care about Bitcoin anymore. Like the lack of loyalty.
You see it right now.
Certificate,
You see it. Everybody's fucking infighting, and it's just like, well, why were you guys here to begin with? Is it for money? For money?
Yeah. And that's not a good way to make money. There's plenty of better ways to make money. You know what I mean?
Morgan, we're coming up on 2-minute mark here.
Okay.
Let's wrap.
I'm sorry to shove so much information into this fucking conversation.
Definitely, we're gonna hear it from everybody. See what the fuck. It is what it is, man. So 2-minute mark. Let's wrap this up. Hopefully tomorrow, everything goes great with you at the court case. I mean, we're gonna have to do a recap of what went down with that end.
Oh yeah. I mean, there's the good scenario. I get another hearing. The bad scenario is you guys don't hear from me anymore, and you're gonna have to call me at 546-05048, which is my inmate number, and you're gonna have to write me a letter because that's the only way. I ain't calling out. You know what I mean?
It's been the first time I've done that. So what do you want to say, man, with the last minute to go here?
I would tell everyone, especially because this is about me, right? We got to put the ego in there. Go read all my white papers on Medium. Go listen to all my interviews over the years. Go down and read all my cool tweets. And don't believe any of this bullshit in the news that says I'm the devil, because I may dress like them, but come on, man. You know, they're going to arrest the president. What do you think they'll do to me? You know, so you read between the lines. That's my last saying there. Read between the lines.
Thank you, Morgan, for coming on the Defend the Network podcast, and we wish you tomorrow.
And I appreciate your work, man. Thank you, Tony.
Cheers. Thanks, Morgan. Defend the network, people.
Bitcoin is the future.
Cultish fucking psychopaths, fake but they recycle that. Flood us with these lies, we ignore it, then we cycle back. To this anchor we are called a time chain, our minds break. In this rabbit hole so deep, we wired up our time frame. We just call it time preference, started with divine presence. Immaculate conception, shit posting is perfection. Dunking on central